right is Doug Shields.
I thought it was the far left. Oh, you mean my...
Doug Shields has represented the 5th Council District on City Council since 2004 and held key positions as both finance chair and 2 terms as council president. He served as chief of staff to Council President Bob O'Connor for 12 years. Prior to that, was a litigation paralegal for 9 years at 2 major law firms specializing in corporate, commercial litigation, complex case management, and environmental law. That's 3 sentences, more than 3 sentences. Hugh Fitzpatrick McGough grew up 5 blocks from here, went to Catholic school on Craig Street, and graduated from Columbia College in New York City in 1978 with a degree in English. He got a job nonetheless. He worked as a newspaper reporter in Wheeling, West Virginia before moving to Chicago.
If you call that a job.
A job. A master's in journalism from Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism. He worked as a TV news producer in Pittsburgh for 10 years, taught journalism at Pitt as an adjunct before attending Pitt Law School. Oh, Mr. Butler? Not here? You asked us to read that, okay. During his 2-decade career as an attorney, he's earned a reputation for defending civil liberties and protecting individual rights. Dan Butler, who's not here, has given us his bio, 34 years experience in the legal community, 11 years experience as a Pittsburgh City magistrate, and he's a Pittsburgh native. All right. So I have a few questions, and then I'm sure Chris has some. If you have any questions, remember, write them on a card, bring them up here, and Chris, the voice of the people, will ask them. Okay, first question. The law creating the magisterial district judge position as the first entry into the judicial system specifically did not require magistrates to be attorneys. Your experience in this specific district aside, do you think that law was written correctly or should it be changed? Why don't we go this way? No.
Well, I think that the position of magisterial district judge descends from the justice of the peace system, which goes back to colonial times. At that time, there was no Pennsylvania judicial system, and the Crown in England appointed capable, respectable citizens in counties and districts like Penn's Woods to resolve disputes, to order criminals into the paddocks or whatever, the stockade. So that the magisterial district judge system in the late 60s and the 70s evolved into the magistrate district judge, and the present title is magisterial district judge. Do I think and going back to colonial times, there wasn't a lawyer in every district any more than there was a doctor in every district. The magistrate would travel around from county to county to hear cases. Do I think that the law is wise? Well, if there is a deficit in legal ability and lawyers to do the job, yeah, it makes sense to reach out to non-lawyers to perform this public service. Is that 0, Rick?
That's 1 minute.
White means 1 minute. But if there are lawyers available, as there certainly are in the 7th and 14th wards, there are important constitutional issues and rights at stake at the proceedings that occur before district judges. All criminal cases processed through the district judge. Every preliminary hearing, all of those hearings, the criminal defendant has a constitutional right to have an attorney represent him because his liberty is at stake. He could be ordered to jail immediately by the magistrate. It's preferable that the judge deciding that case likewise be a lawyer. Similarly, on civil cases, which up to $12,000 in dispute, you can resolve it in a magisterial district court. The rules of evidence apply both in criminal and civil cases. They're not easy. They're not straightforward. I've been practicing law for 20 years, and I still need to take a 3-hour course with Jim Lieber, who is a very prominent attorney in the 14th Ward, who teaches a class every year in evidence.
So the answer is the law should be changed?
I said that if there are no lawyers available, that it's appropriate that non-lawyers be eligible for the spot.
Yes?
The law should stay the same.
No, the law can stay the same, Jeanne.
Law can stay the same. I wouldn't advocate to do that, and I think there's a lot of wisdom in the reason why that. You have 3 branches of government, an executive branch, a legislative branch, and you have the judicial branch. None of them should be exclusive to any one of us, we the people. I believe in that very much. we have 48 district magistrates in Allegheny County right now, 14 of which who are right now practicing attorneys. And in the city of Pittsburgh, there are 13 magistrates sitting on a bench, 2 of which are attorneys. I don't think it's a question, I don't see us having a crisis at this point with arraignments, setting of bond, dealing with disputes of, civil disputes of $12,000 and under and so forth, just because someone's not an attorney. And to exclude that branch of government from the deep well of the people and what those perspectives the people bring in would be to diminish the judicial system.
Thank you. The second question involves some of the issues that come up before the district magistrate, family issues, particularly domestic violence. The average woman living at risk of a partner of family violence attempts to leave the situation 7 times before she's successful. Many of these women turn to the magistrate's course for advice and assistance. How would you work with existing agencies and others to create a system of support that would enable women to leave faster, surer, safer?
Thank you. I have a lot of experience in that area. I wrote the domestic violence law and promoted that through the council in dealing with police officers. We had 64 city of Pittsburgh police officers with PFAs at that time. One, I think it's very important that someone in the position of a district magisterial judge would have the perspectives necessary to make those kinds of decisions. Second of all, there's a domestic violence court downtown in the municipal courts building that a magistrate will sit on as well. Make no mistake about it, a district judge can only, and this is one of the few instances where you have an ex parte proceeding where there is not the other side present. And a district judge can only give you an emergency PFA for 24 hours or working, if it's a Friday, you get Saturday and Sunday, it's effective, and then that person would have to go to a court of common pleas judge to get a much longer PFA, something 19 weeks or something like that. But it's incredibly important that the judiciary is working hand in glove with whether it's the legislative body and or the executive branch of government to continue to bring that awareness to society. And we had that opportunity when Judge John Doe McDaniel, President Court Judge, worked with me on crafting that legislation. So it's incredibly important to have that. It's actually one of the things that a district magistrate is going to contend with rather unfortunately regularly. So it's a piece of that, and there is in the judicial canons where the judiciary has an obligation to help promote good, sound laws. It's in the judicial code. And that would be a role that I'd be happy to help give advice on.
Mr. McGough.
Councilman Shields and I, before he was a councilman, that's where we became acquainted, I was assistant city solicitor in charge of bringing the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police from 1998 through 2004, bringing the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police into compliance with the Federal Justice Department consent decree that required overhauling of procedures and of personnel in response to allegations of violation of civil rights, racial profiling, allegations of excessive force. All of that included police officer misconduct, including a cluster of instances of domestic violence by male police officers against women. It fell to me as the labor attorney for Chief Robert McNeely to initiate and prosecute termination proceedings and lesser disciplinary proceedings against those police officers accused. In that capacity, I prepared the cases. I prepared the prosecutions of those officers accused of domestic violence. I have presented the evidence and interviewed the witnesses of domestic violence, and I have prevailed in those cases. I've also seen the weaknesses in those cases and where the evidence does not hold up. And I lost a couple of those cases. I've been out of that position since 2007. The case that is presented to the district judge must be decided on the law and the evidence. You are not an advocate for either side, but I will never forget the experience I had preparing and prosecuting domestic violence cases involving police officers.
Thank you. Again, the question I said I was going to ask everybody, have you ever been endorsed by, sought, are seeking, are planning to seek an endorsement from the people concerned for the unborn child life
at the same time.
or any other anti-abortion group? This one should be quick and easy.
You speak up, please.
Sure. It's a question about whether they have ever sought or received an endorsement from an anti-abortion group.
You ready, you?
No, and they've lobbied against me.
No, I've never done that. No.
Okay. All right. The other thing that the magisterial district court is often the first involvement of children in the system through minor crimes and neighborhood issues. What plans would you put in place to make sure this is the last time children go into the system? What interventional strategies would you develop with social service organizations and the schools to prevent the current movement of children into the criminal justice system?
And I think it's mine or you. Take a pick.
I think I went second, so I'll go
All
first
right.
this time, Councilman. You know, I represent young people in Magisterial District Court, and I'm struck by Jeanne Clark's question that how do we make sure it's the last time they're there? Buy-in from the parents, and I've represented these kids. If the parents are responding in a way that this is the end of the world, that you've been charged with a summary offense for lighting matches on the roof of the Manor Theater, it makes it a lot easier for a lawyer or for the judge to assure that it's the last case, that it's the last time that kid is on the hauled into Magisterial District Court. Involvement of the parents, impressing on the parents. So this is something that the judge does. Impressing on the parents that it is their responsibility, if they're available, to oversee the child and to take this seriously is the only way that I've seen where if you don't have buy-in from the parent, the lawyer and the judge can be as forceful with the minor as possible, and it's hard to assure it's not his or her last time back there. That said, I've represented many of the graffiti artists, a G20 protester. I've represented kids with matches on the roof of the Manor Theater. I've been to magisterial district courts throughout Allegheny County, and I've seen the effective ways that magistrates have handled those cases to promote the likelihood that he won't or she won't see them back there again.
Thank you. As a Pittsburgh City Councilman, I've had the honor and the privilege of serving a city and dealing with all that lies within it, and obviously our children are a big part of that. And certainly as someone who's been an advocate for children on city council and for the programs that we desperately need, instead of curfew centers, why not day camps in the summer? That's my perspective. Sitting on the bench, you also have to have a value of what this community is about, what we have as a value in the 14th and 7th Ward. You have to have someone that's been around the block a number of times in this community, and Lord knows I have been, to better understand what is going on in the child's life, in the neighborhood's life. We understand the dynamics. And when someone's brought before a district court, someone's going to have to sit there and make a judgment as to who this person is, who this family involved with this child is, and is it something that maybe a more serious approach needs to be taken, or is it more of a more constructive, we had a couple of kids in Frick Park drinking beer, are we going to throw them in Schumann, or are we going to do something a little bit more creative and a little bit more longer lasting and productive with the family and so forth about how to resolve that issue with the children that come there. That what's incredibly important about that, at least in my perspective, is having someone sitting there on the bench who's able to penetrate what is going on and to understand what is going to be required as a response to the offense that that child may be in front of you for. And certainly you don't want to throw the kid out with the bathwater, so to speak, when you're talking about potential opportunities for college down the road, the driver's license, all these other things. But you're going to have to sit and make a judgment. And I've been dealing with children in my council district for a long time. I've been dealing with parents in my district for a long time as well. Set up mediations between groups of warring factions in schools, community, and so forth. So you have to have someone that has the experience of making those judgments on a day-to-day basis, and I've done that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Butler has joined us, so with the agreement of the audience, I will ask him the questions that have already been answered by the other candidates. First question. The law, and you have 2 minutes to answer. There's the time. You get a white card, you have 1 minute. A yellow card, you have 30 seconds. And a red card means stop talking. The law creating the magisterial district judge position is the first entry into the judicial system specifically did not require magistrates to be attorneys. Your experience in this specific district decide do you think the law was written correctly or should it be changed?
Well, first of all, I would apologize to all those people who came to hear from me and the other candidates tonight for not being here when it started. As an Orthodox Jew, I think I made record time from the time the Sabbath ended until right now to get here.
And my apologies for not knowing that.
No, that's fine. You know, as having spent 5 years as a hearing officer in family court wearing a black robe and 11 years as a judge on Pittsburgh's Magistrates Court, the one thing I learned is that we have a very narrow role. And that very narrow role does not include suggesting or advocating for legislation. One of the jobs at this low level of the judiciary, and this is frankly the lowest rung on the judicial ladder, is to hear a case and invest everything that you have become into deciding that case properly. Would I advocate for different laws? It's not my role. I do whatever the law requires, and I deal with the law as it is, hopefully. Those decisions were made in another place, and they seem to be logical. I'm not going to be the one to advocate for any changes in any laws. I have to deal with the laws of Pennsylvania. I have never found them to be deficient, at least on that score.
Thank you. One of the issues that's dealt with by magistrates is domestic violence. The average woman living with risk of partner or family violence attempts to leave the situation 7 times before she's successful. Many of these women turn to the magistrates court for advice and assistance. How would you work with existing agencies and others to create a system of support that would enable a woman to leave faster, sure, safer?
Let me give you my background on this. I started out in 1978 as Larry Kaplan's law clerk in family court. When there were protection from abuse cases at the beginning of the PFA Act, I was there. I learned from him, and I remember sitting in his chambers and hearing a police chief from one of the communities outside of Pittsburgh say to a woman, "What's the matter with you? Don't you know to stay away from him when he's drunk?" The world has changed in the 30 years since then, thank God. And it got to the point where, after having been a hearing officer in family court and having dealt with this face-to-face thousands of times, I then became a judge in the magistrates court where we actually, and by the way, whoever gets this job, the bulk of their job will be dealing with the crimes that people get arrested for in the city of Pittsburgh. There are very few cases in our district, fortunately. We don't have as many problems as you might think in our district. The bulk of the job for this person, and the reason that the Supreme Court kept this position open, is so that that person can serve downtown at the municipal court. That's what Nate Firestone does, and they expect to have the person who fills this job do more of it. For 11 years, I was a judge in domestic violence court. I was certified by the Federal Department of Justice as a judicial expert in domestic violence. We have a relatively good system in place in that domestic violence court that requires men to attend extensive educational courses. We need the same thing for women. There are agencies that are on the scene from the women's shelter that there are representatives from the women's shelter that are on the scene that help these women. It's an educational process. I would speak and talk about it everywhere. I think women have to know that he's not going to get better. If this happens once, it's probably going to happen again. Women have to know how dangerous it can be to stay in that situation, and we have to have some sort of accommodation so that they have help. They can't just walk out of a house with children, with problems, with no education, with no job. We have to help them. And that takes a real realignment. Over 30 years, I've seen that realignment take place, but there's a lot we can do.
Thank you. Have you ever been endorsed by, sought, are seeking, or planning on seeking endorsement of people concerned with the unborn child, Life Path, Southwestern PA, or any other anti-abortion group?
I have never been endorsed by them, but I would love to make the attempt. I certainly would. I would ask for their endorsement because I think the conversation would be really a hoot. I would really love to have that conversation with them. So yeah, I wouldn't shy away from it. I'd certainly ask for their endorsement.
Another question. The Magisterial District Court is often the first involved in the children in the system. What plans would you put in place to make sure this is the last time children go into the system? What interventional strategies would you develop to prevent the current movement of children in the criminal justice system?
Anything that benefits families would benefit those children. So any program that strengthens families is good. But let's face it, I did it for 11 years in thousands of cases. I had 2 programs that dealt directly with children that worked great. The first one was my Youth or Consequences program, where up to a half dozen kids would sit with me on the bench all day, watching literally dozens and dozens of criminal cases. And they would get the perspective that a judge gets from seeing those cases. And it's astounding how that changes their perspective. I had jail guards and police lined up to give me their nephews, their children, and the kids that they came up with, as well as every school in the city was giving me kids to sit up there and have that experience. They gave me the most troubled kids, and they gave me the best kids who wanted to be lawyers or judges. A. B, I had a community service program that required almost 10,000 people during the course of my tenure to do community service as an alternative to going to jail or getting a significant fine. If they didn't have a high school diploma, I made them get a high school diploma before they were free and clear. I did that in over 10,000 cases. I had a special agency whose whole purpose was to supervise that community service. We painted and cleaned up and raked and gardened all over the city. We used to clean the jail trail along the river. We did a lot of work in Frick Park, and for some of those people, it was the first real work they had ever done. And it was amazing how that changed their perspective, how that helped them out. And I had plenty of parents come afterwards and say, wow, you reached my kid. My kid wants to get a job. My kid got a GED. Over 10,000 times. It required, in every case, not just that I hear the case and send them on their way, but that I hear it again to make sure that they did it, or a third or a fourth time to make sure that they did it. And that required a lot more commitment than was normal.
Thank you. Now you're Kosh.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
There's no doubting that there's a problem with police violence in the city of Pittsburgh and our inability to reach and properly punish the police who are involved in violent acts against the citizens or against their loved ones. What solutions do you see for this problem? And let's start with Doug.
Well, as a district magistrate, I'm not so certain if that is really relevant to what the job is. I don't understand it. You know, certainly I've had, as a legislator, certainly a position of advocacy about police accountability, about accountability of government in general. When you're sitting on the bench, and we've spent an awful lot of time talking about criminal acts and so forth, there's a whole other side of that is the civil side, which is where you come down for your rent disputes and landlord-tenant disputes and so forth. But, you know, when you talk about it in those terms, is that what does a district magistrate do about police violence and so forth? The district magistrate does what any other course of action would be brought before a district magistrate, and that would be where the entry of that comes to. That's where the officer in question or any other criminal would be, or someone being charged is number one, arraigned. Is there a showing sufficient to have someone held over for trial, and is the bond appropriate? And then within 2 to 10 days, they have to have a preliminary hearing where the DA is going to come in and make a showing, where the defense does not have even an opportunity to present anything anyway. But what I can tell you is this, is someone that would sit there, whether it be a police officer or an ordinary citizen, is one, they're going to get a fair application of the law. They're going to have someone and me that's going to sit there and look at the facts of the matter as presented by the prosecuting attorneys from the district attorney's office, and there's not going to be a bias one way or the other. Or do I like cops, do I not like cops, whatever. That has nothing to do with anything other than what that job is about. And that is where you're going to get a fair hearing, and I don't care if it's a police officer or the President of the United States, that's what a district magistrate's job is there to do. And however, and there will be no bias there, that it is going to be decided on the facts of the matter, and they will be meted out justice as any other citizen would be.
The importance of the parties to a hearing coming away from it feeling that they were treated fairly, that there was no bias, and that there was an impartial consideration of the facts and the law is clearly enhanced, where you have someone who is conducting the hearing, who has, in the course of his 20-year legal career, represented a broad range of interests. With respect to the police department, there's been an amazing balance that has occurred in the course of my legal career, where, as I mentioned earlier, for 8 years, I was the attorney for the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police. For the last 4 years, I've been the attorney for the Citizen Police Review Board, which is the outside critic of the conduct and management of the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police. As a result, I'm hoping that in the event that I'm fortunate enough to be elected to the district judge position, that when police officers or accused come before me, they will know that I have been in both of those positions. I have been both on the side of the police bureau, and I have spent a whole lot of time preparing cases and defending those who were accused. And in the result, the legitimacy of the decision and the impartiality of the hearing that results from that enhances the likelihood that it's going to be final, that you come to the proper determination that both sides can live with and not end up appealing unnecessarily or not have some error in the course of an evidentiary determination in the hearing.
Realistically, when there is police violence, they arrest the person who is the victim of that violence. And the word victim is used, you have to use it as objectively as possible, because that's the way it works. And you do see them in the first stop in city court, which is where the person who gets this job is going to spend the bulk of his time. And let me just tell you one story from city court that is unfortunately the kind of story that tells you the problems involved. There was a robbery. The police are chasing a man with a gun. The man jumps into a Cadillac that's waiting by the curb with its engine idling. The Cadillac pulls out. One cop jumps in front of the Cadillac, holds the gun, and points at the driver, screaming, "Stop or I'll shoot." The driver keeps on coming. The cop jumps out of the way. Subsequently, they chase down the Cadillac, they arrest the guy with the gun, and the driver of the car is arrested for aggravated assault, for assault on a police officer, because it's a felony. In hearing the whole story, which you have to have the patience to do, it turns out that the driver of the car is a gypsy cab driver who is also an assistant manager at a Giant Eagle, who had taken this fare, was waiting for the man to come out of his robbery, not realizing it was a robbery, and when he got into the car, he held a gun to her head and said, "You drive," even though there's a cop standing there with a gun. The cop jumped out of the way. She's charged with aggravated assault. I was able, with the assistance of the public defender and the DA, to straighten it all out and make the part go away involving the driver. And that included having the assent of the officer who, once he heard the story face-to-face, understood what had happened. But, and this is the most important point, that cop was later disciplined for not shooting the driver, because in that situation his training says he has to shoot the driver. So we need a balance. Maybe we need different policies. There's a lot of things we need, but you also need somebody who can sit there and look at the people eye to eye and hear the story and resolve it.
This is a question from the audience to build on the answer from the first question Jeanne asked. What uniquely, and I'm emphasizing the adverb uniquely, qualifies you to hold this position and thus earn the Democratic Party endorsement?
And who's going first now? I'm losing track.
Mr. Butler, you should start.
There you go.
Okay, this is the third time in 42 years that our neighborhoods, the 7th Ward and the 14th Ward, are choosing a judge. It's only the third time in 42 years. It's a choice, particularly by the Democratic Party, that will be looked at by everyone else. The Post-Gazette is going to editorialize about that choice. And my claim is that I've been training for this my entire professional life. I started studying under Judge Kaplan, who was probably the finest judge in family court's history, certainly the longest one. I spent 7 years watching him and learning from him and listening to him. I spent 5 years as a hearing officer in family court, hearing thousands of disputes. As a volunteer, I mediated and settled over 1,100 custody cases, just as a volunteer for the court system on the side. And then for 11 years after Sophie Masloff appointed me, and Tom Murphy did it twice more for 2 successive terms, I was an actual judge in the Municipal Court of Pittsburgh, which is where whoever gets this job is going to be working most of the time. And I know that job well. I understand about people. I can settle problems. I have endless patience to hear both sides, to resolve situations. That's why 95% of the cases that went through my court, 95% of the criminal cases that went through my court in the municipal court never went beyond that. Even though you hear about jury trials and everything that's going on in common pleas court, only 5% of the cases ever made it to there. Most cases are settled in the municipal court. That's the way it should be. I know how to do that. I can do that.
Well, one thing that's unique about me is that I'm new to this. I've not worn a black robe before. I've not held elective office before. I would be a first-time judge, first time in elective office. This is the third time I have sought my party, the Democratic Party's endorsement for judge. The last two times was for a county-wide position. And I had immense popularity and success in the east end of Pittsburgh and very little support in the rest of Allegheny County. And as a result, I didn't finish anywhere near the winner's circle. My slogan for my campaign is the East End's lawyer for East End District Judge. There were three signature pieces of legal work that I've done during my career. One was the Lamar billboard case, where I represented City Council in getting an illegally issued electronic billboard permit revoked in downtown on the bus station. That was hugely popular in the East End. It wasn't very popular in Moon and in Mars and in Monroeville. The second was the work that I've done on police reform, and I've discussed that with you. The third is that I lobbied for and helped enact and serve as the chair of the Allegheny County Human Relations Commission, the first commission of its type to extend the same types of non-discrimination protections that have existed for many decades in the city of Pittsburgh by local oversight and local people enforcing and educating and persuading their neighbors to participate in good neighbor relations. The first, I'm serving as the chairman of that commission, and it's extending all of those protections that have been in Pittsburgh to the borders of Allegheny County. The Democratic Party, for me, is supposed to be and has been a pathway to participation and representation. Based on my background, I believe that I have shown that I've got the credentials and the experience to be a very successful, fair judge of the municipal court and of the magistrate district court.
Thank you. Why? Good question. What would make me a good district judge? One is that I have served this district, certainly in the 14th Ward, in and around this city, and in this area in particularly for 19 years now. I know what the problems are in this district. I know that there are criminal acts that have to be resolved with it, and being the gateway to that, as I said, the preliminary hearing, the indictment. From then on, it moves on into the courts of common pleas where you're going to be represented, and that's certainly true in the criminal side. I'm going to be a full-time judge. The attorneys that sit on the bench certainly cannot be practice in the criminal side, but they certainly maintain and can maintain a civil practice. I'm going to be there full-time. I'm going to be someone that also has the ability to talk, that understands this district and certainly understands its values and what goes on in this district. A lot of what is going to go on is understanding how to mediate disputes. This is a place where the community comes to get those nettlesome neighbor backyard fence things resolved. I've done thousands of those cases. I've worked with mediation groups and dealing with children after we had a murder between the communities of Greenfield and Lincoln Place, to sit down with people and mold some sort of resolution. This is a place where things are resolved. This is what I have done for 19 years. Yes, I sat in the city council and I wrote law and made decisions there based on the law. But I also spent an awful lot of time in communities resolving problems, and that's what this job is about. It is not where we're not an appellate review court. This is a place to resolve your issues. And you want someone there that understands the values of this community, understands the people of this community, and understands how to get to the end of a problem, not to create a new one, and to afford our community someone that understands judicial discretion and someone who's going to look out for your best interests. Thank you.
Now, You were all promised another 2 minutes wrap up, although I think you all just did a delightful 2-minute wrap up, but you're more than welcome to take the 2 minutes and make any further points. We're running a little long.
Okay. Thank you.
Since they closed the Pittsburgh Magistrates Court and gave the job to, among others, Judge Nate Firestone to do the job downtown, dealing with everything that the 5 police departments of Pittsburgh have to deal with, I have been working under a federal grant just to represent parents in family court who need support and need help. And kind of as a sideline, I also do all of the adult disabled children in Allegheny County who need child support from parents who have effectively abandoned them. I go all the way to the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, and I have represented hundreds and hundreds, primarily of women, because those are usually the custodial parents, to get them support. Kind of as a sideline during that time, for about 5 years, I had a business right here on Murray Avenue called endittoday.com. that was unique in the world of divorce. If you have a pending divorce, no matter how recalcitrant or how angry everybody is, for a flat fee, regardless of how long it takes, I would resolve your divorce. During the course of those 5 years, I resolved every single case without them going to court, because that's a particular talent that I have, that I learned in family court, that I honed by resolving 1,100 custody disputes. Only 2 of those ever went to court. And it's a unique skill that is appropriate for somebody who has to deal face-to-face with the problems of a community and with the crimes that arise, but the neighborhood disputes as well.
I became a lawyer in the mid-'80s, prompted by the AIDS epidemic and the way it impacted my friends and my community. I saw people being put outside the protections of the law and in need of representation. And at that time, it wasn't even clear that gay people could be lawyers. They certainly couldn't be soldiers. Questionable whether they could be teachers. A whole range of options were were questionable. Nonetheless, I saw the need for people to advocate with law degrees on behalf of that group of people, and graduated from law school while volunteering for the Pittsburgh AIDS Task Force in the early 90s, and represented the first gay PFA in Allegheny County. I represented people who at that time were outside the law, were marginalized by the law. And at that time, it was even questionable whether a person could be disbarred for having a partner of the same sex as I do. It was a dream for me to become a lawyer, and it was a dream for me as I saw people adjudicate cases and hear the arguments that I presented and decided those cases on the merits, on the facts, and on the evidence. It was my dream to be recognized as worthy and capable of sitting in the judicial position as well. Not only in my lifetime have I seen lawyers, doctors, and just in the last few months, members of the military can now be people of can now serve in the military regardless of their sexual orientation. This is not an afterthought to me. This has been a quest that has gone on for 20 years through putting together an impeccable career as an attorney. I have the highest recommendation of the Allegheny County Bar Association's Judiciary Committee, which vetted me and looked at my legal service, my experience, my ability, and my proven reputation for integrity, and has ruled me, has deemed me to be well-suited for this position. I ask that you give me that same rating when you go into the voting booth. Thank you.
Thank you. I've had the honor and the privilege of working for this city and working for all of you in this city for over 19 years now in Pittsburgh City Council. I've worked, before that, I was 9 years as a litigation paralegal at some of the, 2 of the most prestigious firms, I think, in the city. I've worked with just about every McGough you can think of. I have Tom McGough, his brother, Walter McGough, a very distinguished attorney, Hugh's father. I've had the honor and the privilege of working with some of the really some of the greatest attorneys in the city of Pittsburgh. I did that for 9 years. And that's what carried me, I think, and served me so well in city council, is I had a fundamental understanding of the law. I knew how to write it. I know how to get it done. And some of the laws that I did write were things that, as I said, are more reflective of the value of things that we share in this community. The bubble zone law that I wrote, the lost and stolen gun reporting requirement I wrote, the illegal billboard. At the end of that, I ended up arguing the case because they cut our funding off. What I offer you is a perspective on this community that is unique. And as the only member here before you, sitting before you, asking you for your endorsement, is that someone that has lived this life, someone that has been involved in this community, that has mediated your disputes successfully, that has written law that has been challenged in appellate courts and upheld. If anybody wants to suggest I don't know anything about the law, I do. And I wish to contribute in a new way to this community through a passion of mine, and that is the law. And I think that I'm eminently qualified to sit here and to make sure that you get justice, that you're given the time to tell your story, that you have a place to go when you have a dispute of landlord-tenant matters or housing court, where I've written laws about that, the ordinances that would be effectuated in a court of law, and having the understanding of what the intent is. That's why I'm running today, and that is why I would ask respectfully and humbly for you to allow me to serve you in a new way, and that is as your district judge sitting here in the 14th and 7th wards. Thank you very much.
I want to thank all the candidates.